Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order the July 17th, 2018 work session for the Methacton School District Board of Directors. Please rise for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. By way of announcements, the public is hereby advised of the audio and video recording of this meeting for the purposes of rebroadcasting. There was an executive session of the board held on July 16th, 2018 at the Farina Administration Building for the purposes of discussing matter of personnel. As many of you may know, we lost a member of our community recently. Miss Candy Alabach passed away on July 4th, and her voice will be missed from our board meetings. I know that we didn't always agree, but I admired her passion and dedication to our district. So if we could just have a moment of silence in honor of Candy. Thank you. By way of attendance, we have all board members here this evening, and for recognition of guests and scheduled speakers, I turn it over to Dr. Zerbe.
Thank you, Ms. Larsenis. This evening, before we introduce our guest speakers, I'd like the board and the public to welcome Che Regina. Che is our new HR director, and he started yesterday, and he's fully apprised of all matters of personnel in the district. So today, please ask him any questions that you may feel necessary. Just kidding, but he's hitting the ground running, and he's a welcome to the Methacton administrative team, and we look forward to many days and months and years ahead working with Che. So please welcome him, and so for this evening, if there are matters that are of concern of the board, while Che is summarily apprised, I might be able to answer those. If not, certainly we will take note and get those answers to you prior to the voting meeting. So with that said, welcome, Jay, and we'll move on from the agenda. So tonight we have the Methacton Education Foundation check presentation, the master plan update, and then on the 24th we'll have Emma Awards for spring sports and a transportation update by Mr. Bicker. So this evening it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Beam and Nikki Krelovich from the Methacton Education Foundation check presentation.
Hello, I am not Mr. Beam. Jim, excuse me, is on his way and will probably walk in the middle here. But tonight we are really excited as the Methacton Education Foundation to present another check to the Methacton School District for $1,100 for the Skyview Loaner Instrument Program for Economically Disadvantaged Students. And we have the lovely Miss Tracy Bugosh here to help explain a little bit about where this money goes and the impact that it has.
Good evening, school board. And Nikki, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to receive the check for Skyview. Each year we have students that come to us and want to play a band instrument, and I don't have them in the closet for them. So when I sat down with our elementary band teacher this year, it became very obvious that I needed particular instruments, and this is the opportunity for me to be able to serve those students in our school district. So I appreciate everything you're doing for our program, and to the school board for supporting our music program.
Thank you very much. And we have a picture opportunity, and we're going to turn the photo. Oh. Great.
Horizontal one.
Horizontal.
Yes, you got it.
This is probably the best camera, just so you know.
I'll do whichever you want. Not too high. Wow, that looks really good. Is that Jim? Yeah. You can jump.
Be glad you don't have to work in Philadelphia every day.
Okay. Smile.
Sure.
Hey Tracy, before you leave, just a quick question. So with this $1,100, we're gonna buy a couple of instruments then?
We're getting 2 flutes, a clarinet, and 2 trumpets. They're already ordered and already assigned by students in my file.
Awesome. How many more instruments like that do you think we need?
Can you give me until the end of September and give you a better answer?
Yeah, I just even a ballpark. Yeah.
I'm looking, this is going to continue into Arcola, and Arcola could need a few instruments this year also.
Okay.
So,
All right. Thank you.
give us a few weeks and we can let you know.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Education Foundation. It's always a pleasure to have you present to our staff and on many important efforts, so thank you so much. Next on the agenda, we have the master plan update, and then we also have the 2018-19 proposed projects. So Mr. Fretz and the construction team is here this evening to present.
Good evening. I must admit, I'm a little blown away what you said about Candy. We're all professionals, and we're all used to people in the community. Some are belligerent just to be belligerent, and there are others who have a lot to say, but they truly care. And having sat through property committee for the last year and a half or whatever it's been, she really cared. And I'm sorry, she was a nice person, Candy. We're going to, Dr. Zerbe, if it's all right, we're going to first address the project at Arcola, give a quick update of what's going on at Arcola, do the same at the high school, and then roll into that, if that's all right. Yes. Because I don't see it anywhere else on the agenda. This way we can cover everything. So Phil's going to start off with the good news at Arcola.
Good evening. Wasn't really prepared for a project update, but I'll blend that into what I have specifically for you this evening. Things are moving along. About a month ago, in our first official project update, they were projecting we were a few days behind. We did have a project update at our last meeting past Tuesday, I believe, and we are back on schedule. Those days that were lost have been made up. And at this point in time, it looks like this week, if the weather hangs on, our roof replacement portion should be complete. So that was projected for substantial completion, I believe, August 3rd. So we are ahead in some areas. Overall, when we look at things, there are some things that are starting a little later than we had in the schedule. Other things have started earlier than anticipated, so we have a good feeling that we're where we need to be to have things completed on time. The other component of that is I think we have a good team. They're working together and coordinating well in the field. Nobody's been fighting with each other, sharing space well, so that's always important too, that you've got a group of people working together. So in all, I think we're at a good place. The outlook is positive at this point in time, and so we'll get our next update, I believe, in the early part of August, so we'll let you know where we stand at that point in time. I think the real kicker will be the September, or the end of August into the beginning of September, when our mechanical equipment shows up, and seeing that's really kind of allows us to close up the exterior of the building and really get a projection on when the systems can go online. We did run into an issue. We had an RFI that was generated some weeks ago. The response to that was basically required some field verification. Once we took the plaster ceiling down and exposed all the steel structure, and we could see the path that was intended for the ductwork, we had some crashes with steel bridging that wasn't readily apparent as we were trying to interpolate from concealed space to old drawings, and then there are some crashes with catwalk supports that need to be modified. The initial request went back to the contractor to say, what's this going to cost us? That request came in at almost $23,000. We took a look at it, recognized that there's some pricing that was not according to contract terms, and the net impact with that done correctly should not exceed $18,300. The good news is, we bid this project, as you know, with labor and material allowances included in the bids. And basically, what a labor and material allowance is, it is a scope of work that's defined pre-bid that the contractors provide us a price for. Those funds can then be used at the discretion of the owner. If they're not used, they're credited back to you at the end of the project. In this case, we are looking and recommending this evening that we use the labor and material allowances in the general construction contract. Combined altogether, they total $27,400. There was some money allocated specifically for steel, but that was more things relative to general construction work. This is really a crash that we found with HVAC with the ductwork. We've spoken also to SMJ and their steel subcontractors willing to work on this on a T&M not to exceed basis. The reason I'm here before you this evening is twofold. One, anything in excess of $10,000 needs to be brought to your attention for consideration. This will not be a change order if we apply it against the labor and material allowances. It would be absorbed, so there would be no formal change order for approval, but we felt it necessary to bring it in front of you so that later on you say, well, that exceeded $10,000. Why didn't we know about it? The other issue at hand is why it's critical to talk about it this evening. Ductwork is showing up on site, but I can't put it up until I get the steel out of the path. If we get a nod of approval, I realize this isn't a voting meeting, that you're in agreement with this, we can contact the contractors tomorrow and they can have the steel guy on site by the end of the week to start removing that bracing so we can keep the ductwork going. So that is where we are at this evening. On a good note, with the roof contract getting done early, and not having used any of the labor and material credits in labor and material allowances in that contract. Also, we did have a change with the roof edge metal. We have a total credit coming back of just under $4,500 to the district in that contract. I can't trade between contracts to offset that, but net out cost in the project, that's another piece of good news coming to you. So overall, even with this change, we're running close to break even on the construction bid prices. Questions that I can answer?
I have a question. So you're saying that the bid for moving the steel out of the way is $18,000, but is it being charged on actual time and material?
We don't know what the final cost is.
Okay, so it could be less, but not to exceed.
Correct.
Okay.
It's hard to determine, in fairness to the contractor, because we'll work on a sloped floor with the slope in the auditorium, and it's all lift work up in the air. So it is tedious, and we understand that, but I kind of feel, and rightly so, the contractor covered themselves with their number. Fortunately, they're willing to say, yeah, I'll work with you and do it T&M, so we will only be exposed to the actual cost.
So it's T&M up to that
Correct.
cost. Thank you.
And I do need to clarify, part of this may come out of the HVAC contract. I haven't gotten full clarification. They were planning to use the HVAC contractor's lift, so if that's the case, there's about $900 that would be out of the HVAC contract. The balance would be out of the GC. If we move it all over into one contract, it will all come out of the GC contract. So, any other questions?
So just so we clarify something here, so we can't really just kind of give a nod of approval. So we either have to vote on something or not vote on something. But it's my understanding that the simple fact of us accepting the bids that we did in terms of including an allowance meant that we authorized the allowance, just not the exact work that may have
Right.
to been done under the allowance.
That is a fair assessment. We put in things for structural steel, cutting up concrete slabs and things like that we anticipated we may have hit hidden conditions. And so that bid has been approved. Those funds are already allocated to the project. Obviously, we're not looking to spend them if we don't need to. In this case, this is a true hidden condition that was not revealed, and so is appropriate to apply against those labor and material allowances.
So I think my question to the members of the board is, are we comfortable knowing that either A, we've already approved and accepted the bid and that these allowances are acceptable under bid under the original motion that was carried out, or would you feel more comfortable with us putting together a specific action item and putting it on the agenda for your vote next week, knowing that it may delay? Will it delay? I guess I got to ask that question.
It's my opinion, as you said, you've already approved the expenditure of labor and material allowances.
I
I
understand
believe
that.
it can go ahead. We don't know the final cost because it's being approved, authorized as I'm suggesting to you, authorizing it as a time and material not to exceed, so I won't know a final number till the work's done. So if nothing else other than we agree consensus that that's the way to proceed, we will report back what the final number is, whether that's $16,700 or $14,000, whatever that might end up being. So, and at that point in time, no labor and material allowance will be spent until that's formalized, and then we would respond in a formal letter to the contract to say, apply it against these labor and material allowances. Otherwise, the board wouldn't see a physical change in front of them. There's no need for that because we're using the allowances.
Understood. I'm going to ask the property chair for a second. What's your opinion on where we need to go with this?
Well, Phil brought this up. I mean, we talked about this in property earlier, these changes were coming. I would be more comfortable because of the dollar amount if we actually put a vote to it. Is there, I guess we would be helpful if we had a solicitor, but could we even put a motion on the table tonight, allow public comment, and then vote on it now? I'm not comfortable even with that. Go ahead.
Putting kind of a legal hat on
Sure.
because it wasn't advertised as a voting meeting, I don't think you can do that. But again, I don't have a number. I think you can authorize us to proceed and then ratify, or just, we don't need a vote. I just need a consensus to proceed, and you will be presented with a number of what that final amount of the T&M cost is, and whether you need
So
an
here's-
action.
here's-
I'm comfortable with the fact that we've already approved the amounts under the allowances, and because they're going to be proceeding under the rates that were part of the original contract, that the work should proceed. He's informed us, he's informed the committee that this is,
Yeah.
Dan, you want to add to
Yeah,
this?
I was just going to say, having done a lot of this, a lot of boards never even see this. As long as it's within the allowances that are already approved and included in the bids that you already awarded, it's only when you run into a situation when the allowance doesn't cover something and now you need additional funds, then it has to be brought to the board. But a lot of times, we never...
The classic example is if you were doing a big excavation project and you knew you were going to hit rock, you didn't know how much, and you had an allowance for 1,000 cubic yards of rock, as long as you were working under that, typically the board says, yes, we understand that, keep an accounting, but once you go over that, you need to let us know. What's a little different here is we're using other allowances, and we just thought it prudent to bring it before you. So, hey, well, you only had a $4,900 or $3,900 steel allowance. Why'd you use this? It all works out, though, because it's a true labor, time and material cost, and you can shift those around.
So I'm comfortable, and when we've done this in the past, and if it's more comfortable for the board, I certainly can get the solicitor's opinion by sometime tomorrow. And if the opinion of the solicitor is that that is what we can do, then we can inform the contract team and move forward. I don't recommend we take a vote this evening on it.
That's fair, I just thought I'd ask the
Yeah,
question.
no, yeah.
Dan, can you comment on what, or maybe Phil, what the difference is between the change orders that we previously approved last month?
That's one thing I didn't print out. I know we're close with this even in there. We're close to break even overall on the total project.
No, I'm saying procedurally, what's the difference between the change orders we approved last month? Were they outside of the allowances? Because that's...
We did not use allowances for those. That's what the difference was. That was a change in scope to the work that was approved and modified the contract through a formal change order that is signed.
Okay, you're correct.
There's actually an executed document that really requires an action by the board at some point in time to sign and say, we changed the scope of work.
Okay, you're right.
This scope of work is ill-defined because we don't know what the hidden conditions are. Now that we know what they are, we have a cap on it. We're just coming to you to say, hey, this is how we're
Your analogy
proceeding.
to rock when digging is a good one. I'm entirely comfortable with it.
We've had this under other construction contracts, specifically the field project.
Yeah.
It was...
I'm entirely comfortable with it. I don't know if anybody else has any questions or concerns about doing it this way, but I'm comfortable.
Any other comments or questions?
I would have you run it by the solicitor, just to make sure that we're in balance. I mean, I respect you guys, and I know you guys know what you're doing, but just to get from our perspective as opposed to our consultants' opinions, I think that's a good approach, and just to keep this moving forward, I would say, if he's okay, let's just go ahead.
So does anyone disagree with what I'm suggesting? Okay, all right.
Then we'll wait to hear from you, assuming
Yep.
we get a result in the positive. Otherwise, we'll be back here, I guess, next Tuesday or whenever the board meeting
Correct.
is, waiting for an action.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Before we move to the high school, just from a Highline standpoint, the auditorium is going very well. From a project standpoint, we struggle with, can we try and get it done a little earlier? The answer is still no on that, but we're tracking well schedule-wise and budget-wise and everything. The project's going really well. The high school project, I won't say on the other hand, it's just that it's not as sexy as the auditorium. It's just, mechanical work, some miscellaneous steel, fire alarm, electrical panels, things that you really don't see, some of which you feel. Job's going fine. We're tracking well on schedule. We definitely have some issues with the contractors, but we're working through them. Nothing that we have to present tonight to bring to your attention at this point. So unless you have any specific questions about the high school, it's moving along. And the roof work, we had a couple of slip-ups with the roof. Roof is being replaced in sections. We discussed it in property, and they got hit by a couple of storms, and the temporary patch didn't properly cover in anticipation of the storm. A couple leaks, they're being handled. There's no cost to the district, so that's the high school project. Ralph.
Sorry, just one question. Everything with the contractor in that case where they promised to cover the work, that everything is proceeded as appropriate?
So far.
Okay.
So far. Like I said, we have some other issues beyond that, but nothing that rises to the level of having to bring it to the board at this point. If we thought there was an issue with schedule, we would say something. One of the contractors has asserted a potential claim. Based on the documents, we have denied it, and we haven't heard back. So if we hear something further back, I think we discussed it briefly in property. We'll bring it to your attention as soon as it becomes something that we have to deal with. Brian, did you have something? Okay. All right. Moving on to the master plan, the base master plan. I don't have my wingman had a little bit of an emergency. He's fine. So I'm going to try and work through this. Mark, if you could kind of join in. And everybody has this document.
The document's attached to the agenda item for this presentation.
So, and Ralph, again, likewise, please feel free to chime in. We're at the point where we're looking to approve the scope of work to be completed in the 2019 summer program. So this is like year 2 work. It is nothing in this packet is novel. It's something that keeps showing itself on a monthly basis. So this is kind of like the latest iteration of what has been discussed over the course of months. And again, everyone has this. I don't want to. Everyone does have this. Okay. The first, again, it's broken down by school. Arrowhead, and it's okay if I run through this? It's all right. Arrowhead had a couple items. The first one had to do with the cooling tower steel support, and the second one had to do with, actually the way it's listed in the master plan was to have the ability to replace the units in the event that we had an emergency and the units failed. So it was like a placeholder financially. I don't know if we want to get into more detail at this point on that. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, so it was brought up in the property committee regarding the condition of the chiller and the cooling tower. And you see here pretty much just talking about the chiller or the cooling tower. But it was determined at that point the chiller was out of warranty as far as that went and in need of rebuild. So we were past its hours, which is what we've been doing. It's called an renewal, and we do it in we've kept up with them in all of our buildings. So we were past that, and that was one issue that if it went down, we could be looking at some large dollars associated with it. Not that the rebuild cost is inexpensive, but it would be double. So moving forward with that, we looked at getting that done and talked about it, and again, we said, yes, we'll get the price and get it done. So I believe I can have that rebuilt by August 15th. That's the deadline that the contractor has to do it and that they committed to. And associated with that was also the cooling tower steel, not the whole cooling tower. You understand the cooling tower frame holds this thing up in the air inside the boiler room, and it has some heavy oxidation on it, rust. And so at this point in time, we looked at, okay, what do we have to do to make sure this thing's stabilized, and that's replace that base. So that, I had a number, I believe, around $18,000 for doing that work, but I'm also proceeding to get some others before we move forward with that, and that would happen independently of the chiller. So, but those two pieces of equipment work hand in hand, and looking for a downtime there probably of 2 weeks. And today, they had confirmation today. I saw that we may be getting this thing next week. So as I know more, as far as the downtime, I'll keep everybody posted in our team.
So with that matter, at the property committee meeting, there was much discussion about this particular item. We were trying to provide the property committee with some understanding as to some of the risk involved in the decision-making process. And that's how we, came to the determination to move forward with this and get the chiller rebuilt as well as have the steel replaced. I guess, for Mark or for Mr. Fretz or for Dan at this point in time, are there any questions on that particular matter? So generally speaking, those items would technically come off this proposal that is before you right now. So we're not doing this twice.
Mark, can you just comment for the rest of the board on what the impact would be if these systems failed?
Well, if the chiller fails, obviously we wouldn't have cooling in the building, and we had researched that, did our due diligence, and said, well, if we had gone down, we'd still spend around $82,000 to get a rental in here was our best estimate on that, to get it up and provide cooling for 6 months. So, and obviously that time frame, how long did it take us from the time it went down to get cooling back in the building? So that was one of the scenarios that we looked at. We went through a number of scenarios talking about new piece of equipment and et cetera, but we felt that the most frugal point at this juncture would be to have the stability by going ahead and rebuilding this chiller.
Yeah, so when we talk about, so in essence, it was a purely economic decision. It was $83,000 for a rental versus $70,000 for a rebuild. So it doesn't make any sense to prepare for a rental. I guess on this sheet, Mark, that we're looking at here, we've got, items A, B, C, and D. Really, A and C are the two items that we're going to rebuild, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Cooling tower, steel, and
D is listed as
rebuild.
2019 work. I just want to make sure that was clear that it was A and C that we're going to be proceeding with.
Yes.
Any other questions on that?
Yeah, just one quick question here. So with the work that's being done in terms of the replacement of this, will this take all of these off of the list now that this will be all the work that will need to be done in this category for Arrowhead?
No, I would still say that the cooling tower itself, the media in the cooling tower, the ongoing maintenance, that's something else that would have to be looked at in the future. But that wasn't something that when we were talking about it that we felt was an imminent situation that was going to stop cooling.
Okay.
Any other questions? If not, continue on with the proposal.
Any more Arrowhead questions before we move on to the next building? Okay. Mark, you can stay up here. I'm sure we'll be talking. Okay, great. Eagleville, you may recall we had already done some investigative work on the building envelope, and items 1, 2, and 5, the balance of the first page, all have to do with directly addressing and remediating that work in a permanent state next summer. So that's what all of that, you may recall there's been some conversation about temporary fixing of gaskets at the windows. This is the permanent fix, and it's not, again, like all these things, it's not like we're saying we want to spend this money, but this is what we're allocating in a worst case scenario to address it. Any questions about that?
Questions on Eagleville?
There's one more on Eagleville. Sure. Then And then the last item on Eagleville, the top of page 2, that's sort of a recurring item. And again, everything here flows out of the feasibility assessment. But we'll see that the paving and sidewalks and curbing repair work repeat itself also at Woodland, and I believe at Worcester also. So again, it's maintenance more than it is capital improvement, but we're capturing it here. Mark, do you want to articulate any more about that?
I mean, certainly the numbers get big, when you look at the volume. When you're talking about a pavement plan, if you're talking about, I don't know what the total square footage across the district, but it's important that we move forward to identify what level these are, much like roofs, because if we have places where we're depressing the slab because of underground water situations, instead of being a small repair that you could take care of, relatively easily, you can be doing full depth restoration on large areas of your parking lot, which gets very costly, instead of just dealing with the surface, the ceiling, the crack ceiling, that type of thing.
Just one question in terms of the rationale. Are we doing all this work together to, kind of save money with them all together? Because I know that some of these in the original facilities assessment study were, in that 5 to 10 year bucket range. We're kind of pushing them up pretty close. Is that the rationale behind this?
Similar to what we did this year with getting the masonry investigative work out of the way for the most part.
Okay. Do we, and maybe this was discussed in property, when we move things up in the schedule, do you identify which things have been moved down in the schedule? And do we know what they are?
Yes.
Yeah.
Brian's been very diligent with that. We're trying to keep up with the workbook, and we've moved the things around.
Yeah, the workbook, the way it's done, there's like highlighting done to show what projects are moved up, what gets moved back, and so forth. So there are the detailed schedules that they've been tracking.
And the cost is even more tedious with Mr. Bricker in terms of documenting every bit of hard and soft cost on a constant basis.
Can I ask you guys one question? And it's pervasive throughout a lot of these. Like if I look at Eagleville, item B, it says team is requesting to move forward retaining a consultant, and then there's a $46,000 price tag attached to that. Is that the estimate of the work to be completed, or is that the consulting?
Consultant.
So that's $46,000 of consulting at Eagleville.
The 1.150 is the placeholder for the actual work under item EV1.
I was looking at
I'm sorry, where are you?
EV21B. Paving curve restoration.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, that would cover both the that's hard and soft.
That's hard and soft. Yeah. Okay. All right. Gotcha.
Yeah.
And that's the same case for all these other that have
hard
similar
and soft are built into it, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question about EV2 and 5. I'm seeing that in the description for EV2, it talks about the deterioration of mortar joints or improperly installed or missing through while flashing. And then in EV5, it talks about there are a number of locations where exterior gaskets are too short and may be allowing water to enter the window system. So it sounds to me like those were construction shortfalls, there were improper construction, versus some of the other ones sound like it's just wear and tear, like just weather changes or things like that have affected the curbing. But this sounds to me like it was construction error.
100%.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we were up to, are we okay with Eagleville? Any questions about Eagleville? And then we move on to Woodland, the middle of page 2, and the first couple items, they're all connected. I mean, the third item has to do with water shedding toward the building, but they're all kind of the same item about, paving, sidewalk, curbing, similar to what we just discussed at Eagleville. If anybody has any particular questions about that. Worcester. Which one is this, Mark? The window seal and failure?
Library.
Do you know more about that one?
Yeah,
On
requesting to
Worcester.
move forward to assess that and create a big bid package. That was along the, we were getting some water in and some of that gasketing along the library area over there. And that's what we were looking at doing some of that work.
Excuse me, since the Eagleville and the Worcester are similar type of buildings, do we have the same issue? With the issue we have at Eagleville, do we have that issue at Worcester, or could potentially have that issue at Worcester?
No, I don't believe this issue is the same issue at Worcester as at Eagleville.
I'm trying to remember, it was the same contractor, I don't remember. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry?
Stutner was the GC at Worcester, or at Eagleville. I forget who was at Worcester.
Somebody else?
It was a different GC, and Mark is correct, the problems are different. My recollection of the library is more the aluminum entrance system, and it may even be more of a detailing issue, or a combination detailing and construction issue, where you're getting moisture in at the base of the curtain, or not really curtain, the aluminum entrance storefront system.
Which is on grade.
Correct.
My question is, it says here, though, for immediate, because it's damaging right now the carpets and the casework, and we're looking at it for the summer of 2019? In the windows at Worcester. If it's saying it's in, I'm just curious why we're going to wait till the summer of next year.
Well, right now, when we did this report, I don't remember if it was 2 years ago that this stuff was brought up, and we've gone through and pulled it, I have that volume with me. So there's many things here that we're working into the schedule to try to address, and picking these things out and getting them done. To answer your point directly, I don't know that every storm we're getting water in there. I don't know that to be the case. So I've not been over there to go back there, but at some point in time we have gotten some in.
I just think moisture, carpets, mold.
Yeah, absolutely.
So unless there's any other questions, I think we're on to Skyview. Skyview is just another section of roof. Right now, we're just doing the roof on top of the auditorium. So this would give us another section of roof on Skyview. Anything on that? With regard to the high school, bottom of page 3, these are masonry items. These are items we've already retained a consultant to do an exhaustive research analysis. So the monies allocated here have to do with structural envelope issues to actually be fixed in 2019. The analysis has already been done. You already paid for or retained the consultant to do all of that work, and that study was completed. So that would take us through the first HS 1, 2, 3. And you can see
Dan, I'm sorry.
Dollar-wise, it's quite a bit of work.
I want to go back to Skyview for a second.
Sure.
I'm looking at some of these issues with the roof, and it sounds like, to me, these don't sound like the kind of issues you should be seeing in a roof that's only about 10 years old. I'm wondering if any of this has been, have we looked into whether or not we have any recourse with our contractor? Because that building was just opened in '09.
I don't know.
And I guess the question is, can you confirm that the roofs we're speaking about are actually part of the new construction of Skyview? Because some of the work, it's about labeling versus whether or not it's part of Skyview or part of Arcola.
I believe it's part of Arcola that we're talking
But
about.
let's confirm that
Yes.
before next meeting, but that's a very good question.
And we've had other sections where you had the manufacturer come in and honor the warranty. We'll get a specific answer to that. Right, very straightforward. So again, over at the high school, all of those masonry items, 1, 2, and 3, again, a significant portion of next year's funds are for masonry structural foundation repairs pursuant to the study work that was completed. The other item on the high school is roofing, another section of roofing. Item 4. And then the cooling tower, another section of the MEP work for the high school. And the last item, I don't know if you want to touch on this, Mark, the last item is predominantly cameras and miscellaneous items picked up in an external study.
Yes, there was a study that was performed throughout the district, risk assessment study. One of the things that came up in that study was the requesting to take a look at our camera system and look into doing some upgrades around the district. And that's what this dollar amount is for.
In regards to that item, is this something that we could look to the grant for safety money for? One time, this would be a perfect example. Okay, thank you.
Just for clarification, the only residual item to research is the issue with the roof, just to make sure. I'm sorry. Oh, I thought that was a question. The residual issue is to research the issue of the roof to make sure we're not taking advantage of recourse that we have or warranty. Did you have a question? I'm sorry. Okay. All right, thank you.
So just to clarify, so we have a document posted. You've seen the document of the proposed projects for the summer of 2019. What we would like to do, similar to what we did for year one work, is if the board is comfortable with these, we'll put on the agenda a motion that would be something very similar to this. Authorize the administration to proceed with design and document preparation work in order to present bid responses for the board's review and consideration for, and then there's a dollar amount of what these, I think if we pull some, I have a dollar amount of $5,840,000, but that may actually change because we're going to remove some projects here. But whatever that dollar amount is, to total the full project up, and we'll update this list in year two work as presented in the master plan. And basically, that's what the motion would be, so that we could proceed forward with getting those documents prepared. Is there any concern at this point in time putting that on? And certainly, we might have more discussion at the next meeting, but timeline-wise, we're on the schedule to meet a sooner bid process than we had this past year, and this is part of that timeline. Any thoughts or comments?
Yeah, I'll just reiterate a comment I had at the property committee meeting, and it was that, I'm in favor of roofing, HVAC, masonry, windows, water leakage type projects, but if we're going to pull anything forward, I'd be more in favor of pulling forward that type of work as opposed to sidewalks, curbs, and things along those lines where, obviously you can't have cracked sidewalks everywhere, but if you could patch it temporarily, relatively inexpensively, but pull forward some more roof type projects, I think I'd be more in favor of that. Just to get what I've referred to in past of these building envelope issues kind of squared away, so we can prevent future problems. Thanks.
Yeah, I think part of the conversation was at the property committee meeting was to look at whether we could maximize getting all of our labeled F roofs or D roofs potentially squared away in place of some of these other items. So, if there's we didn't necessarily get that specific direction from the committee, but Mr. Earnshaw did mention those items. So I don't know where everyone else is on the board, because we want to be able to provide the list of things that are obviously going to get us moving forward with getting these projects going. So with what was said before, and just so Mrs. Kankler, you're aware, there's probably a number of items that have that label of these things should be done soon, like within the first 3 years of the work. But with the number of projects that kind of fit that, along with other things, and trying to leverage our buying power, they're not all fitting into the first year, where one might assume that it's written up that way to do that. Other thoughts?
I have no objection to this being at the voting meeting next week. I would ask, though, that the workbook that you're referring to, that's been referred to multiple meetings, if that could be shared with the full board. I just have a difficult time voting in favor of something if I know what's being taken away. So that would be helpful. And in general, I do agree with Brian's statement. Just keep in mind that even though we want to save money in terms of packaging things, I wouldn't want to do it at the expense of safety. So.
And also, the number, the 5.8, is not what we had used in the long-term projection of expenditure? Is there an expectation that this is the stuff we need to do now to get earlier for the quoting, and that there will be additional items added later on? Or this is the new number?
Yeah, very good question. So we'll consider the package that's in front of you as the base package that we put before the property committee. There were additional options that we put before the property committee that had a number of questions associated with them, and they were not ready for presentation for a decision or a recommendation from the committee, nor are they ready for, full consideration by the board. So we have one of two options. A, in order to stay on schedule and keep projects on a timeline that are fundamentally necessary and have reasonable support to move forward with, we get that on the table, have the board act, we start moving on those $5.8 million. There could be an additional $2 million worth of projects to stay within that cap that we were talking about, to determine whether or not we want to do these other projects. And we would like to be able to come to you at some point when we're prepared and we get the okay from the property committee to kind of move those forward. So there could be additional projects, but there may not be either, if in fact they don't find themselves to be reasonable to conduct in this coming summer.
Yeah, just to add to what he said, so there was, I would say, on the order of $2 million or more worth of optional projects that we asked them to come back with more information on so that we can make a decision and bring things forward to the full board. Things like the roof at Worcester. We've done a lot of patchwork up there. We've had the contractor doing warranty work up there, but that warranty is now up. And it is one of the lowest rated roofs in the district. So there's an opportunity there to get ahead of things. That's $1 million. Mike, to your comment earlier about what we're pushing back, the big thing is the second phase of the MEP project at the high school. That will be pushed back a year, but we think that, and Mark, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong or misspeaking in any way, but the bulk of the work being done this summer will impact a lot of the issues around the gym and the pool and the dehumidification in those systems and the issues that we've had there. So there were also issues around the balancing work that we were going to look at that would define scope for the coming years. Certainly the fact that we're looking at $1 million or more for Eagleville to correct what are some pretty fundamental envelope issues there, that played a role in this as well. So that chewed up a chunk of money that necessarily forced us to push back that MEP work by a year. Dan, Mark, do you want to add anything?
No, I think that was very accurate on what you said. It is key. We're moving forward with something that's going to change the environment right now in the high school. There's some big equipment going in there, and it could make a difference on how it operates. And in the future, when you get into your commissioning and balancing of the building, it's going to identify issues that will really help us create a better package.
Any other comments on the master plan and the proposal before you as an action item for next week? If not, if there are any questions in the meantime, please email them to me and we'll try to get you a sponsor immediately.
I did come up with that. To Brian's point and the point around, I assume that the recommendation is to move forward on a lot of this concrete asphalt type of work. But would it make sense, is there an urgency with that if there's additional $2 million-ish coming with optional things to delay this to determine the choice? Is there an urgency for July 24th to make a decision on what we're doing on the concrete at this particular point in time? If that's, it seems like, I think I would expect there's pretty much consensus on the core stuff, but that last element around the concrete and asphalt.
Definitely not. I think with we did a little bit of patching with some asphalt work last year where we saw some small potholes, if you will. The concrete issues that we have been reoccurring for it's cracks. It's from wear and tear from plowing the snow and ice, of course, and I have been going back and repairing them. It's just those repairs, while it's just say it's a half an inch, that doesn't really hold real well through the frost and the ice. We put it in there and it comes back out. But for the to put a few $1,000s to make sure that we have it safe. I think it's a good investment and buys you some time to do some bigger projects.
Sorry, Mark, because my question was probably vague. So you're saying that this is not a immediate requirement, it's a choice?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
So I would suggest that we maybe pull it out, and then if it determines from the property that you want to bring it back again with the second wave, we can discuss at that point. But if it isn't really a critical, mission-critical item, it does seem like there's more pressing things that were in the book.
It's mission critical that I keep it safe. And we'll spend a few $1,000s on being able to do that, but we don't have to do the full-blown takeout sections and remove it. Understanding that if we don't make that decision in the next year or the next round of, we'd spend a little more money again to keep these patched up.
I'll just add, Paul, I don't think that what is it, $250,000 or $300,000 here that's associated with paving is handicapping any of our decisions that we're making on the other projects.
I was just going to add, if there's a concern to revisit it, we'll bring it back to, we'll redact that from the overall schedule.
I wouldn't have any issue. We can do that. If everybody wants to just take it off and vote on the other stuff this month, I'm okay with it. We could bring it back, in another month with the rest of it. I don't think it's necessary, but if that's the will of everybody else, I don't have a problem with it.
Just want everyone to be happy, so.
We'll remove it. Okay. All right, if there are no other questions, we'll move on to, for next week's meeting, we'll have the reports from all the committee chairs. There's two advisements for your information. We'll have public comments on action items, and then we'll have approval of board minute meetings, and then the fiscal items. Mr. Bricko, to my left.
For this month, you'll have the list of bills to approve, the treasurer's report. I will state that the treasurer's report does have an adjustment from the Finance Committee of $62 in the officials account, as there was a replacement check miscommunication and adjusted for. There is no budgetary transfers for this month. Under the master plan contracts, there's 4 different contracts, 2 of them which are associated with the tab and commissioning, and the other one is for soil and masonry testing, and the last one is for the masonry restoration work on the roof at the high school.
Dan or Mark, do you have any comments on any of those 4 contracts to fill the board in on those matters?
I think we brought it before, the testing and balancing that would occur at the high school and at the middle school to take care of the current equipment that we're installing right now. There will be a much bigger project in the future. The Shepherd Restoration Services media was that we had brought in a structural engineer that was approved, and when we looked at that, there were some structural issues that we need to do some further investigative work, and that would involve the geotechnical work that was not included in Shepherd's original or in Shepherd's work. So their scope didn't cover that. So really, and we have a number in here, and it's much like other things. When we see the whole layout, we can get, depending on what they're planning on doing, we don't know exactly everything right now, but we believe there may be some boring and some compaction tests around the building, and we want to get a jump on this to be able to hopefully get this work, accomplished ASAP.
We'll do it on a unit price basis.
Yep. Yeah, and the unit price would be, we would know, how many of these tests we would have to do. So we will likely be in a not to exceed issue or a not to exceed the amount, and that's what we have listed here of $25,000. And the last one with this Robert Michaels and Associates. That's to do some work on the high school walls that were going around the gymnasium right now. There's some weeps, there's some sealing issues, and there's some pointing that would need to be taking place. That was identified. That document came out after we started this project. So we want to make sure that we're getting up here and getting it done because of, making sure that we're getting up to the edge roof that's going on right now. So we want to, stay in front of that.
Any questions from the board on those 4 agreements or 4 action items?
I do. Is number 3, is that at Arcola?
Number 3 is at the high school.
At the high school, thank you. Could we note that, please?
On the 67 edition back by the stadium, behind the commons area along there.
Any other comments? Mr. Ryan?
I just had a general list of bills question, so we don't get past this. For the legal fees, it lists 2 different descriptions. Do we know what months that covers? It says October through February or February through April, or is it a combination of both?
Which one are you looking at?
The first page of the list of bills, $10,440. And you don't have to answer me now. Maybe if you could just get back to me with whatever you have and maybe some details
I think
around
Brian
that.
asked those questions.
Like I said, you can just get back to me. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions on financial items as presented here this evening? If not, we'll move on to personnel items.
I'm sorry, I did have one question.
Oh,
I
I'm sorry.
apologize. So item 3 at the high school, is that tied into the foundation repairs project that's in for 2019, or is this a different area?
Yes. This will be stabilizing foundations or, investigating what we may have to do that work.
As part of the 2019?
Yes.
Okay, got it, thank you.
Items of personnel. Jay?
Have another number of items for the board's consideration for personnel. We have 2 resignations for the professional staff, 2 resignations for retirement for the classified staff, 7 items for employment under the professional staff, 1 item for employment for summer temporary, 2 items for the change of status for professional, 4 items for uncompensated leave for classified, 2 items under supplemental contracts, 1 item under classified substitute list, 1 item under substitute services, and one item under volunteers.
So while many of these are familiar to you, I believe under number or letter N, substitute services, I'm going to ask Dr. Angstad if she would please come forward to talk about general health resources.
So this item, we are requesting to approve general healthcare resources, commonly referred to as GHR. They're a company located in Plymouth Meeting, and we want to secure them as a vendor for substitute and coverage services for specific areas, school nurses, paraprofessionals, specifically ABA-trained paraprofessionals, and other related services like speech, OT, and PT. I think it's important to note that we do have some vendors that we currently use, but there's also an increasing demand that we face on a daily basis. It allows us to have another resource available to pull in services if we need them, to make sure that we're adhering to and staying in compliance with IEPs and 504 plans. The other benefit of this service is they're very large in nursing services, so it does allow us to get some nursing coverages when our nurses are out, if they're absent, or if we need to cover field trips, so students can participate safely in those events, and making sure that they can also participate fully in those events, and that's really important. GHR has been around for a long time. They're used by many school districts in the area. I know Perk Valley, Lower Marion, Springford just recently went with GHR. They offer very competitive rates. I looked at several other services. They're coming in about $1 an hour for all services, less than the other companies are. And we've just seen a substantial increase in the medical needs of our students, both chronic conditions and complex needs. And I would feel really a lot more comfortable knowing on a day-to-day basis that if I need services, I have someone that I can contact and get those services for our students.
Any questions for Dr. Angstead?
Dr. Angstead, is this General Health Resources, does the IU support, is these sort of one of those collective agents? I know that in the IU, there's a lot of approval for some of these substitute staffing organizations.
Yes, they are a private company, but they also have services with GHR and other agency-type people. So they develop a subcontract. So if I go to the IU for services, then the IU also charges us an upcharge on top of those services. So we've had several agencies approved in the past. I just like to make sure that we have enough services available and people to go to. There are shortages of school nurses. There are shortages of OT, PTs, and speech therapists, and it's really important because if we don't have those individuals available, then we owe comp ed for any time we miss. So just having a resource available. So that's kind of what we're looking at.
Yeah, that's very, very helpful. I guess I'm curious that the IU, and we have trash pickup and so forth, that there's not a negotiated rate that we couldn't use directly as opposed to with an upcharge, but it's interesting. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other comments, questions?
I just was wondering, so this is an agency that's in addition to, maybe we already have a couple agencies
That's
like
correct.
this, and this is just
We're
another
hiring
one.
them as a vendor. It's important to note it's contingency-based, so we're not paying them anything to have the service. We only pay them when we actually utilize the services, and then it's a strict rate based on the agreement.
And you mentioned their rates compared to other vendors that you looked at, but are they also comparable to the current vendors we have?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I thank Dr. Angstead. Any other questions on matters of personnel?
So I noticed under advisements that we have one of our counselors at Skyview moving to the high school. So even though it's not actually an item on the agenda, I'm just wondering, where are we in hiring a new counselor then for Skyview? That's a pretty sensitive and important age to make sure that we have counseling covered at all times. So obviously, you're not going to, I'm not expecting Jay to know this second day on the job.
Fortunately, on my first day yesterday, we had guidance counselor interviews. So
I was not expecting this to be a softball question, so go for it.
Okay. But we are currently told the candidates that we will make a decision by the end of the week.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I had just a quick question, just with best practice when you're doing all these interviews, for instance, the new health PE instructor, do you have best practice when you're doing the interviewing that you have a lead from that area when you're doing the interviewing? I just want to get an idea of when you're with the art instructor and the ones more specialized, what is your best practice with interview process?
So what we've been doing, I'm not saying it's the best practice, but what we've been doing is for like a music position, we'll contact the music chair of that department and see if they're available. If they're not available, they'll reach out to another music teacher. We want to make sure that when we're interviewing for those special areas, usually from grades 5 on up, where things start getting really specialized, and then with the related arts areas in the elementary school, that we have a teacher that has the knowledge background in that area. So we've done that with the music program, we've done it with the phys ed. We had a guidance counselor in the interviews, so whenever possible, we've done that. Now, in some instances, we have 2 rounds of interviews. If we don't get the expert in the first round, we at least get them in the second round, likely when they're doing a demonstration lesson.
what's hard with the summertime is that you don't have a demonstration lesson. So it's, you just want to hire the best that we can and make sure that we have that person specialize in that area in the interview process, and we can't have them do the lesson, so just getting as many people.
Yeah, excellent point. And I think one of the things that Mr. Regina and I had discussed is in the strategic plan, looking at best hiring practices and getting input from the staff. So that's one of the things that, among many others, that we'll have him working towards. I think it's that exit interviews, a lot of things that are critical to the continuum of information to make sure that we're evolving as an organization and operation to best get the best candidates in a way that is certainly within the law, but also in a way that makes the most sense operationally for us. Any other questions on matters of personnel? Yes.
On under L, number 2, the supplemental contracts for fall sports, there do still appear to be a good amount of vacancies. Is this the most current version of the spreadsheet that we have?
I believe this is the most current version. I think it was added just today. There are a number of vacancies, and this isn't unusual at this time of the year.
My concern is the girls' tennis for the high school. Looks like there's no coach or assistant coach yet.
I'll tell you where we're at in the process, and I don't know if you know either. But we'll get you that feedback.
With that, then, during the Education Committee meeting, I would assume that could we review that as well, because we have the activities. I think that's important if we do that in the next August, so we're set for September and put a high pressure on those positions.
I know Dr. Zerbe's making a note of it, but Dr. Katona and I did already discuss the August agenda, so I will, in addition, bring that up to her, so it's doubly checked.
Any other questions on matters of personnel? Mr. Ranch?
Just two things. Under item 10A2, why is the effective date on or before September 7th?
We'll get the answer for you.
Okay. And then the second one was, as far as all these replacement teaching positions, have you done the analysis on, do we need to replace?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's been fully vetted, and the answer is yes, we need to replace.
This is if we choose not to replace this, was similar to the challenge that we had. We would no longer have the band program in the elementary school, which I recommend we definitely have.
No, but there's, using that as an example.
Yeah, just as an example, yes. So every vacancy, and we've had some just recently. I think we had 2 in the last maybe 2 weeks. We then I think we had a social studies resignation, as well as another, I can't remember what the other one was, but there were 2. We reviewed them. The schedules are just about ready to be released. They're needed for operation. Any other questions on personnel? If not, we'll move on to items for curriculum. In curriculum, Dr. Katona being on vacation, dual credit program. So at the high school, we operate a dual credit program. The agreement is attached. In summary, this dual credit program, which we've had for a number of years with Montgomery County Community College, allows students to take a class at Methacton at the same time earning college credits. So it is a college-level course, and it is, for some colleges, it can be used to, colleges forgive students for having to take an additional class. So it's helpful in getting college experience, as well as helpful in reducing some of the overall costs associated with attending school. So if children do go to Montgomery County Community College, like many of our students do, they can bypass having to take this class, a class in as part of their area of concentration. Any questions on the dual credit program? Yes.
I'm not sure if you'd be able to answer this, Dr. Zerbe, but does this differ at all from our current agreement with Montgomery County Community College in terms of, I know that the courses themselves can change based on student interest and needs, but when I looked at this contract, the first two options were basically that the courses would be taught either by one of our teachers or by a college instructor on site here as opposed to at Montco. So I wanted to I guess I'm just wondering whether or not that differs at all from how we've done it in previous years, or if this is just a continuation of the same type of program.
I'm going to confirm, and I'll get back to you. Yeah. Any other questions on the curriculum? Yes.
Yeah, I had a couple questions, and maybe Mary would be better suited to answer them, but things about just overall questions around participation rate in the program so far. What's feedback been like from kids that have gone through it? Have they been able to transfer those credits? Things like the chemistry class that's offered is a chemistry class for liberal arts majors, and there's, when you major in something specific, you can't always, the college wants you to take their class, even though it's the base level class. I'm just curious about what kind of feedback we've had on the current program.
Well, I'm obviously not Dr. Katona, but having a student going into his junior year, I've gone through the course selection guide, and I do know that, for example, the dual enrollment chemistry class, they recommend against it for students who are considering a science major in college, and it's listed in the program guide for the high school. So a lot of schools probably won't take that as a science credit. If you're going to major in science, they want you to take your sciences there. So some of that information is in the program guide, but it's a pretty lengthy volume, so you might want to just get Mary to answer it specifically.
Again, and just to add to that, it's really, it's not so much just that you can bypass the class when you get to college, but it's the rigor involved in the course that makes it the experience of being in a college class. And I know that from my children going through the classes as well.
Yeah, I think it's great. Don't get me wrong. Okay. Is there any cost to the district in offering this? Or I know, because it sounds like it's completely borne by the students that take the classes. Okay.
Any other questions? So we'll get a clarification on whether or not this is any different than what we've previously run, and then we'll get you some participation rate and other feedback information. If not, any more questions? We'll go on to the next item, policy. You can see that there are no items for first reading, but there are, for your approval, second reading items, 5 policies: weapons, nepotism, abolishing of a position, which will be eliminated, the reduction of staff, and the assessment of superintendent. Any questions on any of those policies? If not, under other, we have gifts and donations. Accept a gift in the amount of $1,100 to fulfill a grant to fund the purchase of a loaner music instruments. That's what you saw here this evening. And we did that this evening because it fit into our presentation schedule. We have some transportation approval. So with those items, I just want to make clarification. So at the Property and Transportation Committee meeting, it was requested that we clarify the things that the board actually needs to take action on an annual basis. I posed that question to our solicitor. While there's a number of things that the board is technically responsible under the law for, the items that are recommended for approval under the law, and then one item that we're recommending that is really new as part of our evaluation and having Mr. Brooker's eyes on this whole program in more detail are as follows. The new item, we haven't done this before, is actually to approve the third-party transportation vendors. And once those are approved, once we know who the drivers are that are assigned, similar to what we're doing with First Student, which is by law required for us to approve the drivers, is we'll bring those drivers before you as well. So that's how that all works together. But we felt that getting the vendors approved first, and then being able to contract, and then that gets a list of drivers from them. The next item would be number 3 under there, would be approve the bus stops. And I just want to make it clear that it's listed there, that this list has been provided to the board. The bus stop list will not be posted for public inspection for safety reasons. But it is provided. So the bus routes are not required to be approved according to the solicitor. But the stops and the drivers are. So that's what's on the agenda. Those are the things that are posted. Questions on any of those matters under other?
Under gifts and donations, we need to amend that to be clear on who we're accepting the gift from. We don't have the Methacton Education Foundation listed there. So if we can adjust that for next week. Thank you.
Yeah, two things. One, I want to shout out to Mr. Brickard that we are providing these third-party transportation vendors, as that will be a cost savings in the 2018-2019 budget. So a significant one at that, I think. Also, I didn't say something before, but Dr. Zerbe, I will be coming back on some of the minutes from June that need to be corrected to Mary.
I had another conversation with another board member, and I know there's a couple things that I need to review. So if you do have comments on any of the minutes, please send them my way, and we'll make those corrections. Thank you.
In terms of the transportation vendors, are there any additional vendors on this list that we haven't used in the past?
There's none right now. We've expanded it towards the end of the year. So when I started taking over transportation and looking into the third-party vendors, there was 3. So as you can see, this is a much larger list. We started expanding it. Any route that comes up that first student passes on, we put out to bid. There's a blind bid. No one knows what they're bidding or how much they're bidding. It all comes back to me individually, but I hit all of them at once.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of the bus routes themselves, although they don't need to be approved by the board, will the board see the routes in advance, like we have in the past?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Just to make a clarification, so we've, Mr. Bricker has provided some information in terms of some data associated with the routes, and there was a follow-up explanation today in your inboxes, so if you hadn't had a chance to see that, please take a look at that, but there will be an additional report to update you on that progress.
Yeah, Mike, one of the things that we came back through transportation with was that even though it wasn't going to be legally required, certainly given our experiences the last 2 years, that the entire board, not just the transportation part of the Property and Transportation Committee, would want to see all those routes. So, yeah, I think we've all asked that the level of detail that was in the report that we received, where it's each individual bus, AM, PM, number of riders versus capacity, ride times, start, end dates, so that we all have a level of comfort when we look at it, that we're going to be in better shape than we are last year. And I think one of the other things is next week, I think Tim is going to make a presentation of the board to talk about a lot of those adjustments and changes that have been a focus, point of attention this year.
Yeah, maybe Tim, you'll address this next week, but an update on where First Student is on number of drivers, that would be very helpful.
Sure, I'll check that versus the routes that we have. I know there was a couple less routes based on the configuration, but again, until the rollover is completed, which you'll see in the email, I don't have the full list of students routed yet, so that'll change.
Not holding anybody to anything. I know that like 7 quit on September 1st last year, so I understand, but it'd be interesting to see where we're at, how much of a gap we have.
Will do.
Any other questions on that, Mr. Henshaw?
I guess, is there a reason on the list of transportation vendors should First Student be listed?
Because we're approving their drivers, and we have a contract already existing with them, they're already approved.
They don't need to be on there, okay.
Correct.
And then as far as, with all these other transportation vendors, are there specific routes or types of transportation you're using them for currently?
So this includes the ones that the MCIU engages and the ones that we engage, so it encompasses all of them. Typically, probably our best 3 that we use are Balgo, Kevin Smith's Transportation, and STA. And it really depends on the needs. If it's specialized, MTS does medical. So there's specialized ones that I included from the IU, and the ones that they're using, they're actually looking to expand and add Kevin Smith to their list because of the pricing that we've been getting from them. So that actually is going to benefit the IU overall. It's hard to find people. They also have to have the background checks. I can't just Uber them around.
Right.
So right now, this is the group that I've found. If I find other ones, I'd be more than happy to bring them through. It's not easy to find them, though.
No, I understand that. I'm just trying to get an understanding what they might be used for.
A good example is, the biggest one we use it for is the Macento Vinta with regards to the displaced students and transporting them. So I'll have one student that, let's say, is living in Pottstown. I have to go out there and get them to the school. So rather than first student having a bus go all the way over to Pottstown for one student, which doesn't make sense for them to then be able to support the other transportation of the district, we'll send them out to get that one student.
Okay.
We've done it with kids that have broken their legs and can't ride on a bus, can't get up and down the steps. A car is much easier for them to get in and out of.
Okay. And then, do we have contracts with all these vendors that are listed?
We sure will.
Okay. And those will be in place before we use them? Is that correct?
Yep.
All right, thanks.
So part of the overall discussion is because we started taking, we were contracting a lot while we were using these companies, but we were using them through the IU. So our kind of agreement was with the IU. But again, like similar to what Mr. Bricker said earlier, when we contract with the IU, there's a percentage markup on top of that. So he's bypassed that, and Mr. Winters had brought some, alluded to the savings that we're bringing forward. So the challenge is to get a standardized contract approved by the solicitors that we can use with all of our drivers to protect, the process.
All right, so in essence, we've been operating under the IU contract to this point. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? If not, then we go on to dates for board members' calendars, old business, new business, courtesy of the floor and adjournment. But before we do that, and I turn the microphone back over, I want the board to be apprised that we've been working with a company in the area, Conacelli Motors, who was interested in donating a substantial amount of money for advertisement on the auxiliary field. And while I don't have a specific motion for you here this evening because we're still in the process of, working out the details, I do have a handout that I want to share with you and let you know that while I brought this before the property committee meeting a few months ago, we're just about at the finalization of terms whether I can bring it before the board. The challenge with all that is timing. Our next meeting after next week will be somewhere near the end of August, which our intent is to be able to do this unveiling in the early parts of September as part of the original plan, as part of the way it's laid out in the contract. So while I'm not asking for any particular feedback this evening, I just want to show you a picture of what that might look like. This is the scoreboard on the auxiliary field. It is about 16 feet long, and it's about 3 feet high. It's been approved by the vendor, and it would be in exchange for a $25,000 donation, and that sign would then be erected and affixed to that scoreboard based on the rules or the ordinance associated with signage for Worcester Township for not greater than 10 years. So those are the general parameters, and the solicitor has been involved with drafting the contract to protect the district and to provide the board the flexibility necessary. But it is a going rate. As an example, Norristown did a similar project, actually with Conacelli, but it's for the lifetime of the scoreboard, which generally goes beyond 10 years. So I just want to make you aware of that. If I'm capable of finalizing the agreement and getting the signatures from Conacelli, I will check with the board president to make sure that there's no objection to at least getting it on to the agenda for your consideration next Tuesday. if it's timed right, to allow for you to read the agreement. Okay? Thank you.
Can I ask a question about that? Sure. The donation, is that earmarked for any particular fund, or?
That's a very good question, and that's a question that we've talked about in property as well as at some point in finance. You know, what are we going to do with that money? There is a fund that currently is set aside for replacement cost of some of the field. That was one consideration. Now, we may decide to do something totally different with it, but we would take it as a general fund, receivable, and then take it and then make a determination and bring it to the board for a final determination of what to do with not only this one, but all the other signs that come forward. So the plan is that this unveiling would be the starting point of some additional signage opportunities, because I think as part of this process, Ms. Lynch has been working on trying to bring media coverage and schedule it for the potential date, and the idea is to make a big boom about it, and that way possibly gather some momentum in getting some additional revenue through advertisement. That's the plan.
All right, and with that, we will move on to courtesy of the floor for this evening. Mr. Andrews.
Good evening. John Andrews, Lower Providence. With regard to the bills list, there's a $68,000 item for AP exams. That's a proper use of money. Also, there are many individual refunds. I guess students who put up money and then at some point decided not to take the test and are getting a refund. My general question is, we presumably collect a lot of money from the students, and that finances all or a good portion of the $68,000. Well, then if the student, for whatever reason, properly gets a refund, is the district still paying for the test? In other words, if the district's overall intent is to have the students finance these exams, when they get a refund, is the district still on the hook for that exam? And there's an item for snowplow truck lease for the month of July. That's a little humorous. I've never seen snow here in July. With regard to graduation, a fine and necessary event in the life of our students, there's one item for $27,000 roughly on page 6 of the list of bills for stage equipment, and another item on page 11 for about $9,000 for graduation stage materials. I think there's some explanation. I think those, if that's for equipment that's used whenever a stage is erected and it has a long lifetime, that's one thing. If that's an annual expense, I think it's way out of order. There was some mention this evening of the passing of Miss Candy Alaba. And she's been a faithful attendee and contributor to school board meetings for 12 years. And she's been especially dedicated to the best school district. I don't know of anyone who has a better memory than she had. She spoke well on many critical issues. She long struggled with a very serious heart issue of her own, and I've given some thought to setting up a scholarship in her memory, but that would involve contributions by a lot of people. So That's what I have to offer you for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Is there anyone else for courtesy of the floor? Mr. Bickelman?
Joe Bickelman from Audubon. I'm here to talk about the trash bid and recycling bid that was awarded in June. The board voted to award it to the second lowest bidder and not the lowest bidder that was accumulated through the bid process at the IU. You know how I felt at that meeting. I wanted to know information about why it was disqualified. The lowest bidder was disqualified, Waste Management. I also, at the facilities meeting and property committee of the board, I asked the question, what was the issue? I wanted to know what the issue was. I got an email from Dr. Zerbe at 3:20 this afternoon. He says, you asked a question at the property committee of the board regarding why the recommendation to approve Mascaro for waste and recycling was provided to the board. His response is, another bidder did not provide information required by the bid documents. As such, the other bidder was not responsive to the bid requirements. Mascaro did provide all the documentation and information required by the bid documents and was therefore the lowest responsible and responsive bidder. That explains it all. I wanted to know specifically what the issue was. I want to know what document was left out that we didn't go with the lowest bidder and save the money for the district. It's a simple thing. It's the lowest bidder. They're providing the same service. Who would you take if you were getting trash collection for your home? Same process, all right? No difference in service. The Western Montgomery County Tech School chose the lowest bidder, Waste Management. They didn't go with Mascaro. I don't know of any bids that were disqualified at the IU for not submitting the proper documentation. You also need to know that the minutes are wrong in your attachment for the June meeting. It says that the trash bid to the second lowest bidder was approved 8-0. 8-0 when the vote was 6-2, with Liz Drummond and Paul Winters voting against taking the second lowest bidder. Just think about the process of doing the minutes. Think about the process of doing the minutes, okay? Somebody's watching the TV, they're recording what's going on at the meeting, they're writing it down, they're probably submitting it to the superintendent. Maybe the superintendent submits it to the cabinet to proofread it. Everybody proofreads it, the board gets it, and it says 8-0, not 6-2. Paul Winters is on the IU board. He voted against the second lowest bidder, Mascaro. He voted to take, well, he didn't vote to take it, but he voted against the bid to Mascaro, the second lowest bidder. I have to get my paper a second. But I want you to think about the minute process that's in the minutes that you have as an attachment to tonight's meeting. Think about the process of recording the minutes. And the two hands go up on the TV, and it gets recorded as 8-0. I know Mr. Winter said something about he wants to change something in minutes. When you come at a work session and you get to the part where it says minutes, Mr. Winters, correct the minutes. Correct the minutes that are wrong when you get to that part at this work session. Say what you need to say about correcting the minutes. Not tomorrow, not on email. Correct the minutes at the work session. Just think about the process of taking the minutes and distributing them. Okay, the other thing I have here has to do with...
Mr. Bickelman, I'm sorry, can you please wrap up?
I will. It says here, Mr. Winters commented on the various bids and asked Mr. Dooley, what liability does the school district have around not accepting the lowest bid? The minutes say, these are the minutes, the minutes say, Mr. Dooley explained. That's what it says. Mr. Dooley explained. You as a board need to get these minutes right. You need to get the detail right.
Mr. Bickelman, please wrap up.
One other thing.
Mr. Bickelman, please wrap up.
Do we know when Karthik Ganesh is done working?
Mr. Bickelman, please wrap up.
Why is it on or before for Aaron Troutman, October 7th? I demand we get a public answer on that one. And we need to approve Karthik's date of termination.
Mr. Bickelman, you're well beyond the 4 minutes now.
Just want to say something about Candy. I miss Candy. I offer my condolences to her family. She was a force in the township, and I spent a lot of hours on the phone with Candy, and I miss her greatly. And it's never appropriate, but, you know, she did die on Independence Day. And that says a lot about why she was here.
Dr. Malik.
Jim Malik, Worcester. Just so you understand, the 4-minute rule is not a maximum time. You extend it, you have the power to do that. It's nice to see all you guys here tonight, because a month ago, when you voted on 1/10 of a billion-dollar budget, the front was empty, which I found offensive. You're going to vote on 1/10 of a $1 trillion budget, be here to do that. Because I just got my tax bill. You know, if you're going to vote on 1/10 of a $1 billion budget, be here to do that. Have at least the courtesy to do that for us as taxpayers. The $4 million budget that's in the, or $4 million that's in the escrow account, does the board have a plan what they're going to do with that in case we prevail on the appeal? You guys have a plan how we're going to get that back and use that for tax reduction? You guys have a plan? Can anybody tell me? Mr. Earnshaw had ideas, but he wouldn't tell me. Can anybody tell me? Plan? No plan? No answer. Refuse to answer? Why don't you guys think about it? Because the case is coming up soon. So we want that money back. We don't want to go into capital projects. Let me clue you guys into something. When it comes to Arrowhead and all your discussion that these gentlemen had about the money that's going into capital projects for Arrowhead, somebody made the decision to do the bare bones to Arrowhead. I don't know whether you guys know that or not. The bare bones, 90 grand. Now your facility study said to put a couple million into it. Did you guys know that? Because maybe you're communicating by email about it or having some backroom discussions. A couple $1 million according to your facilities plan. So somebody made the decision to go with the bare bones. I think it was Mr. Navarrete. That should be a board decision to do it. And the reason that that's being done is because you guys haven't made a decision to do anything about Arrowhead. Now, the board should be making these decisions. Can you tell me why you're not making these decisions about Arrowhead, the board? Anybody want to tell me? Do we have a rogue person on the property committee? Is that what's going on? Because, see this? This is what Milo and McBroom gave you guys when you had to make a decision about closing Audubon and Arrowhead. This is the potential cost savings that you guys get for closing Arrowhead, right? Then you don't have to make any decisions about making all these, paying all these costs for doing Arrowhead, right? Here are your potential cost savings for closing and redistricting. Building operational costs annually, savings of $103,000. Personnel costs annually, $896,000. Capital cost avoidance for years 1 through 5, $9.8 million. Capital cost avoidance in years 6 through 10, $2.8 million. A 5-year cost avoidance for closed and Arrowhead and redistricting, $14.8 million. A 10-year projected cost avoidance of $22.7 million. And you guys are up here talking about ridiculous stuff when you could be saving the district $14.8 million over 5 years.
Dr. Malik, please wrap up.
Right. So what are you guys doing? No discussion at all about closing Arrowhead. When your enrollment's dropping like a stone, the birth rate just dropped to 276. What are you guys talking about up here?
Dr. Malik, please wrap up.
Right. So what are you doing? What is this inept board doing when they could be saving the taxpayer that kind of money? Can you explain it to me? Because now I'm going to object under 710.1C. You had a executive session, right? Personnel issue. You have to be more specific. You can't just say personnel issue. Hiring, firing, whatever. So can you be more specific?
I would have to consult with the solicitor on that.
Well, you don't have to. There's a settlement agreement between us, me, Candy Alaba, etc., and the board. So you have to abide by that settlement agreement. You don't have to consult with the solicitor. So now you're violating the Sunshine Law and the settlement agreement. So just say you don't have to say who you hired, who you fired. It has to do with hiring, firing, whatever. Just be a little more specific. That's all you got to do.
Okay. You're well over the 4 minutes at this point, Dr. Malik. Please wrap up.
Well, I'm asking you to be more specific per the settlement agreement and the Sunshine Law.
And I'm telling you that I'd prefer to speak to the solicitor before I respond to that.
So you don't understand what I just said?
I understand what you said. I'd prefer to speak to the solicitor before I respond.
So you don't understand the Sunshine Law or the settlement agreement? Is that what you're saying?
I'm pretty sure those words did not come out of my mouth, so
well, no.
Let's wrap it up.
What I'm saying to you is simply, you don't understand the Sunshine Law and/or the settlement agreement. So I suggest you review the Sunshine Law and the settlement agreement between us and the school district.
Thank you, Dr. Malik. Anyone else for courtesy of the floor? All right. Can I get a motion to adjourn? All right. Meeting adjourned.